one of the things that I really tried to delve into was Jacob's vision.
Yeah.
It's very cool, because Jacob, when he has the vision of Jacob's ladder, Jacob's a bad guy.
Yeah.
He's in collusion with his Oedipal mother.
His mother,
he's deceived his father. He's betrayed his brother. He's a mama's boy. He's intellectually arrogant. He's a coward. He's a bad guy.
Unlikable character.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Yeah. But then he leaves and he decides that he's going to be good. He's going to try to be good.
Right.
That's when he has that dream. Now, the thing that's cool about the dream that's relevant to our discussion is that, so you have this Jacob's ladder, which what would you say, spirals up into the ineffable, right? You can't see the pinnacle. The pinnacle is wherever God is, but you can't see that. And the reason I think that that's relevant and important is because of the paradox that you just described. If you reach your goal, you satiate the system and the motivational framework disappears. Right? So that means there's no direction and there's no hope. That's the problem.
Right.
It's weird because you've attained your goal, but now you're directionless and technically you're hopeless, because hope comes in consequence of positive emotion in relationship to a goal. So actually what you want, you might think that paradise is the land of milk and honey, so to speak, that it's the land of infinite satiation. But the problem with that is satiation destroys the frame and destroys hope. So actually what you want is a sequence of expanding goals with no upper limit. And that's exactly what you see in Jacob's ladder. It's like, so you climb, this is different than Sisyphus, right? Sisyphus pushes the rock up the hill and then it rolls back down the same hill.
Right.
It's like, no, what you actually want is a mountain. And then when you get to the top of that, you can see another mountain. And then when you get to the top of that, you can see another one. And that never comes to an end. So that would be an inexhaustible source of motivation and hope.
Yeah.
And it is independent, in a way, it's independent of accomplishment, because there is no final goal.
Right.
But you don't want there to be a final goal, because then you run into the paradoxical problem of satiation, right? And it is also strange, and you were touching on this, that one of the really weird things about human beings is that we're far more seeking-oriented than satiation-oriented, right? Is that we do want the adventure, we want the craving, we want the desire.
The progress.
Yeah, and the progress. More than we want the attainment. Yeah, absolutely. Like I had a client once, I had a funny conversation with him. He had this dream of retiring when he was like 50, and he had a pretty cut and dried, ordinary, algorithmic job, and so it was okay, but it wasn't a thrill. It wasn't the meaning of his life, and I said, well, what's your vision for retirement? And he said, well, I imagine being on a beach in the Caribbean with like a Mai Tai in my hand. And I thought, well, that's a travel poster, not a plan. And so I talked to him about it. I said, well, look, you're like a middle-aged white guy. You're going to sit on the damn beach for one day and you're going to be so sunburned, you're going to have to hide for 2 weeks.
Right.
And then what are you going to do? You're going to drink like 5 Mai Tais a day or 20? For how long?
Right.
You're going to be an alcoholic in no time flat. You've got no orientation or goal. There was nothing to it at all, right?
Good luck on your divorce.
Well, right. I mean, and your cirrhosis.
These guys at Goldman have told me this for years and years. So you can make a bunch of money in finance, of course. And if you're smart and you're motivated and you have your MBA and you come out like raring to go, by 49, you have $400 million. And I've seen this again and again and again. The people that I've worked with, the privilege to work with, they retire at 49. Why? Because they don't like their work. Their work is backbreaking and they can't see their families and they don't have love in their lives, but they've lost their chops on actually how to do these things because the plot has been lost in their lives. And so they retire at 49.
Yeah.
And then they become very good at golf or tennis. Yeah. And they get a nice dark tan. Yeah. And pretty soon they're having an affair with their tennis coach and then their life really falls apart.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. Here's the thing, Jordan. Woe be unto the man whose dreams come true, because he will find that he had the wrong dreams. Yeah, right, exactly. This is a real problem.
Well, that's also part and parcel of the call to religious humility. It's like, I want to get what I want. It's like, what makes you so sure you're right about what you want? So I think that notion of, this is something I've been discussing with my wife a lot, because she really learned this in the last few years, is that, so we talked about setting an amorphous uphill goal. Yeah. Okay, so that's sort of predicated in part, you could think about that as a religious relationship with the unknown. It's sort of predicated on part on your a priori presumption that you don't know finally what's good for you. Now, but what you could want is to learn that and discover it, right? But that's like an ongoing relationship. And what that does is it provides a solution to the problem of you getting what you want and finding out that it wasn't the right thing, right? Because you still want to journey forward. You want to sally forth, so to speak. But you have to do that in ignorance and humility. And you have to do that understanding that as you make progress, you're going to shift the goal that you're seeking and that should happen. Because otherwise you run into exactly the paradox that you described.
Right. And you have to recognize that heaven is not on earth. Heaven is in heaven. It's fine if there's an end of the rum line as long as it's unattainable in this particular life because we are not geared toward it.
Yeah, well, that's why heaven is so observation. Yeah, well, you know, I've thought about that a lot, this notion of life abundant in eternity. Like we tend to read that concretized and think about that as something like life after death, but that's not what it is. It's, as far as I can tell, it's something like the state that exists when you posit an amorphous, indefinite goal as your ultimate goal, because that imbues everything local with a kind of global significance, right? I'm pursuing the best, and that's how it's manifesting itself in the moment. And that's life eternal because there's an element of it that's timeless. So, you know, in the Sermon on the Mount, it's a guide to what you just described. Christ says, it's very specific. He says, first of all, focus your attention on the highest imaginable. Okay, whatever that is. Like, you don't know exactly, right? But it's because it's indefinite and it's ineffable and it's beyond you. But that's what you want to, that's what you're orienting towards. So you establish your, then pay attention to the moment.
Exactly. And let me put one more twist in this as part of discernment. So making progress on the rum line is, practically speaking, in worldly terms, having more. Having more of what? More money, power, pleasure, fame, more family relationships, more prestige, whatever it happens to be. But the real twist is not just having more. Satisfaction that you can actually count on in life is not having more of the things that you want. It's wanting less. Haves divided by wants is a much better model that's both biblical and psychologically robust. And so the goal should be for all of us, increasing the numerator, having more with respect to our goals, moving on the rum line, and wanting less,
or learning to be so
wanting less.
My wife just did a talk in Salt Lake City, and what she had focused this talk on was gratitude, and she learned this. She started to practice being grateful when she was dying. It's a very strange time to start practicing being grateful, but one of the things that you can think through when you're in dire straits, this is what happens in the story of Job, by the way, is that, well, imagine everything falls apart for you. Okay, now you could ask yourself, how could I make this worse? And the answer to that is, well, I could be resentful and deceitful and arrogant and unhappy and bitter.
Which, by the way, is our psychological baseline. From the Pleistocene, we're evolved toward resentment. We're evolved toward anger and fear because literally there's more tissue in the brain devoted to negative affect in the limbic system of the brain as opposed to positive affect because
it's protective.
It keeps you alive.
It's
like Jordan Peterson exists today because Jordan Peterson's ancestors starting the Pleistocene were resentful. And the result of that is that you're evolved to say, you know, first class on United Airlines has really gone downhill, as opposed to, I'm getting there safe and fast. And I'm sitting in the front of the plane. I'm going to get off early and they're going to give me something to eat. It's unbelievable. That's why gratitude is a divine thing.
And it's a practice.
It's standing up to your limbic system. It's managing your affective, evolved state so it doesn't manage you.
So you're well, the presumption would be exactly that, is that the default attitude, the default untrained attitude is likely to be overwhelmed by negative emotion and resentful. But that isn't fate. You can train yourself out of that. And part of the way you do that, and I saw her do this when she was dying, which was really quite something to see. She decided as an act of will to focus on what she was grateful for and to become an expert at that, And that isn't the sort of expertise that modern people tend to think about when they think about expertise, Because we think of something like propositional knowledge rather than attitude. But it's definitely the case that you can cultivate. Well, what traditional people, traditional European Christians, for example, knew that you could cultivate virtue. And that's a very specific phrase, is that cultivation is practice.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Now, this discernment idea.
By the way, one thing, by the way.
Yeah.
When your wife was giving that talk on gratitude in the room next door at the same conference in Salt Lake City, my wife was giving a talk on forgiveness, which is also adapted, which is also standing up to the limits.
Right.
See, our wives who are godly Catholic women, woe be unto them being married to us. Imagine this.
Yeah, no, I don't like to
leading us in paths of righteousness.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful parallel.
So discernment, that's an archaic phraseology, discernment.
Yes.
And that wasn't something that I saw a psychologist study when I was in the thick of the research enterprise. And so why discernment specific? Like, why discernment? Why that terminology? Why happiness? Why did those things, and how was that related? How was your pursuit of those as an intellectual enterprise associated with that pilgrimage that you took?